Karoline Leavitt walked into the courtroom, flanked by her attorney, Alan Dorsey, feeling the weight of the moment. The chilly air bit at her cheeks as she stepped out of a black Ford Explorer onto the slushy curb of Chestnut Street in Manchester, New Hampshire. Despite the cold, she didn't flinch as cameras rolled and local news vans lined the sidewalk, waiting for the next big headline. This wasn't her first experience with pressure, but today felt different. The issue at hand, complaint tied to a speech she gave at a veteran fundraiser the previous fall, was supposed to be minor. One sentence, taken out of context, was being twisted into an accusation of violating state campaign ethics laws. Her lawyers had argued the complaint was without merit, and everyone in her camp thought the hearing would amount to nothing. But as they entered Courtroom 4B, Karoline could tell this wasn't going to be a routine procedure. Judge Ronald Marks, a former federal prosecutor with a reputation for being blunt, entered late, disheveled and unbothered by the room's attention. His half-buttoned robe and worn leather notebook gave him an air of casual authority. He didn't acknowledge the room, but sat down, adjusted his microphone, and began flipping through papers. Karoline had seen him on TV, known for his strong opinions, particularly on corruption, but also for his controversial handling of political cases. That morning, it was clear which version of him had shown up. He wasted no time, immediately addressing Karoline with biting criticism, questioning her judgment and the appropriateness of her comments at the veterans event. Alan tried to object, but Mark silenced him with a glance. The hearing wasn't about the complaint anymore. It was about something else entirely, something personal. Marks questioned whether her speech was a matter of ethics or simply an attempt to stay relevant in the public eye, undermining civic discourse. The room shifted uncomfortably as Marks raised his voice, targeting Karoline's rise to fame and dismissing her generation's approach to politics. Karoline, steady and unflinching, asked if they were discussing complaint or if this was a public review of her career. Mark smirked, implying they were the same thing. As the tension in the room mounted, Alan requested a formal motion to redirect the hearing, but Marks ignored him, turning the courtroom into something far less structured, a stage for his personal agenda. Just when it seemed things couldn't get more off track, the door at the back of the room creaked open. A court officer quietly entered and took position near the back, though no one paid much attention. At the front, Judge Marks pressed on, now focusing on Karoline's character. He questioned where her bold character had been when she accused elected officials of selling out the country during the fundraiser. Karoline, standing firm, responded calmly, "I stand by what I said. I was speaking to veterans, men and women." The room tensed, but Karoline didn't back down. Karoline stood firm, her eyes locked on Judge Marks as his tirade continued. "Do you treat every young woman who speaks her mind this way, or just the ones who disagree with your politics?" she asked, her voice steady but cutting through the tension in the room. Marks hesitated for a brief moment, a flicker of calculation in his eyes. "I treat people based on what they say and how they act," he responded coldly, dismissing her as just another figure in his courtroom drama. The atmosphere in the courtroom thickened, and the presence of two federal agents at the back, standing quietly near the door, began to shift the air. Marks, still oblivious to the unfolding situation, carried on with his verbal assault, accusing Karoline of treating politics like performance. Karoline, undeterred, responded with a challenge of her own, questioning if the hearing was truly about accountability or just an attempt at intimidation. Marks didn't answer with words, just a thin smile, his gaze returning to the papers in front of him. Meanwhile, downstairs in the courthouse, two federal agents, Agent Keating and Laura Hendricks, stood in an unmarked hallway, their ID badges clipped securely to their jackets. They had been waiting for the signal. Inside the courtroom, the tension between Karoline and Marks continued to escalate, but the agents were focused on a different target. Hidden behind the polished walls of the courthouse, a whistleblower, Jillian Vargas, had come forward with information about Judge Marks's misconduct, kickbacks, abuse of his position, and illegal campaign contributions. The pieces were finally falling into place, and now it was time for action back in the courtroom as Marks continued his power trip. The doors creaked open again. This time, the agents entered with calm precision, their movements deliberate but not hurried. They didn't need to make a spectacle. Their presence alone spoke volumes. Marks, mid-sentence, paused, his face faltering as he turned to the agents. "Excuse me, this is a closed hearing," he protested. But Keating, without flinching, stepped forward and calmly declared, Judge Ronald Marks, we have a federal warrant for your arrest. Gasps rippled through the gallery as a weight of the moment hit everyone in the room. Marks, his expression one of disbelief, demanded an explanation. What is this? This is a setup? This is political. But the agents were undeterred. They handed him his indictment, charges of obstruction of justice, illegal campaign contributions, tampering with court records, and abuse of judicial authority. Marks, momentarily stunned, grabbed the edge of the bench as though trying to hold on to the last shred of his authority. But instead of backing down, he leaned forward, his knuckles white against the wood, and shouted, "This is what they do when someone holds people like her accountable. They find some washed-up assistant with a grudge, dig through your garbage, and call it justice. Laura Hendricks didn't engage. She simply stepped aside, her eyes scanning the crowd. Keating, steady and calm, began reading the charges aloud. But Marks wasn't finished. He ranted about the political nature of the case, pointing directly at Karoline. She walked into this courtroom with a media team waiting for this exact moment. You're all watching a performance, and she's a lead. That's when it snapped. Karoline stepped forward slowly, her heels clicking against the tile as the entire room fell into a hushed silence. "I didn't ask for this," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "I didn't come here hoping to see you dragged away in handcuffs, but I'm not going to apologize for standing up to you either," Mark scoffed. "Oh, please, spare me the hero monologue," he retorted. But Karoline didn't blink. "You tried to humiliate me, not with facts, not with law, but with personal attacks disguised as questions, hoping I'd stumble. That doesn't make you powerful. That makes you scared." For a moment, something flickered in Mark's expression, an imperceptible hesitation. It wasn't regret, but recognition. She was right, and he knew it. "You have no idea what it's like to sit in this chair," Mark snapped, his voice dripping with frustration. "You think it's about ego? It's survival. Every week I'm flooded with threats from both sides. Every case, I'm expected to choose the right politics before I even hear the facts. Do you think that's justice?" Karoline didn't respond. She didn't need to. The moment wasn't about law. It was about exposure. And just as the room began to process what had,